I never imagined that the woman who raised the man I loved could look me in the eye and say I wasn't real family. It happened on a cold Tuesday afternoon. I still remember the way her words hung in the air like smoke. Toxic, lingering, impossible to forget. She said, "You're just his wife. You weren't born into this family. You don't share our blood. You'll never really be one of us." At first, I thought she was joking. I laughed, nervously. But then I saw her face. Still, cold. She meant it. My heart didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly, like porcelain dropped on hardwood. This was the woman I had cooked for, cared for during her surgery, celebrated holidays with, and called Mom for the past 8 years. But in that moment, I was just the outsider. What hurt most wasn't the words themselves. It was the realization that, no matter how much love I gave, I was still being measured against something I could never control. My bloodline. My husband Mark wasn't in the room when it happened. I didn't tell him right away. I needed time to breathe, to process, to decide whether this was just her pain talking, or if it was her truth, finally slipping out. But as I sat there in silence, sipping now cold coffee, I realized something. This wasn't the first time she had said something like that. It was just the first time I heard it, for what it really was. And that moment, that one conversation, would change everything. It's strange how, when you look back, the signs were always there. You just didn't want to believe them. There were little things, so small, so subtle, that I brushed off as nothing. Like the way she introduced me to her friends as Mark's wife, never by my name, or how, during family dinners, she'd pass me over when handing out heirlooms, laughing. These stay in the bloodline. I used to smile. I used to think, it's okay. She just needs time to warm up to me. I told myself that love could bridge the gap, that eventually I'd feel like I belonged. But that afternoon shattered every illusion I clung to. When she said, "You're not real family," it wasn't just a comment, it was a confession. It was her truth. And suddenly, all those quiet jabs, those looks, those exclusions, they weren't harmless. They were deliberate. I went home that night with a smile on my face and a storm in my chest. SoCal. Mark asked me how lunch with his mom went. SoCal. I said, "Fine." Because what else do you say when the woman who raised your husband just told you that you're not enough? But deep down, something shifted in me. For years I'd tiptoed. I'd been polite, gracious, quiet. But now I started thinking differently. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. If I was going to be treated like I wasn't family, then maybe it was time to stop pretending we were. That thought? It would become the seed of a decision I never thought I'd make. And it started with a document hidden away in a drawer. It had been sitting in that drawer for almost a year. The will, a document Mark and I drafted after his father passed. His mother didn't want to deal with the paperwork, the legal terms, the banks. She said she trusted us. She said, "You're the responsible ones. You'll do what's right when the time comes." Funny how quickly trust can unravel, isn't it? That night, after her words kept echoing in my head, "You're not real family," I opened that drawer. I looked at the papers with different eyes. My name was there. So was Mark's, Meme Ross. We were listed as joint executors. Meme Ross? We were to carry out her final wishes, manage her estate, settle affairs. Meme Ross. I'd spent hours organizing it, visiting lawyers, making sure everything was in place. I didn't do it for the money. We never needed it. I did it because I thought, maybe if I showed up enough, gave enough, supported enough, I'd finally earn my place. But suddenly, I didn't want to earn anything anymore, because I already was enough. Her blindness to that wasn't my burden to carry. I didn't do anything rash that night. I didn't yell or scream. But I did pull out the folder. I reread every word, and I began to wonder, if I'm not real family to her, then why should I continue acting like I am? Why should I be the one to safeguard the legacy of a woman who refuses to acknowledge my worth? That thought was quiet, but it didn't leave me. And soon it would lead me to make a change. A change that would ripple through our entire family. A change that would start with just one signature. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always come with shouting or chaos. Sometimes it's whispered, disguised as tradition, dressed up as a joke at the dinner table, or dropped casually into a conversation, like the way she said, "You're not real family," with a sip of tea, like it was just a fact. I carried those words for weeks. Quietly, Mark noticed I'd grown distant, but I told him I was tired. Truthfully, I was just done trying. Done trying to prove that I mattered. Done trying to earn love from someone who'd already decided I didn't deserve it. And as I stared at that will each night, I started thinking, what if she got her wish? What if I really did step out of the role she never believed I belonged in? At first, guilt crept in. I felt like a traitor for even thinking about changing the will. But then, I remembered the Christmases I spent cleaning her kitchen while she praised my sister-in-law, the birthdays I planned where she forgot to say thank you, the hospital nights when I stayed by her side, only to be called just the wife to the nurses. It wasn't just one comment. It was a pattern. One I had ignored for too long. So I booked a meeting with our attorney. I didn't tell Mark. Not yet. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I needed to be sure I was doing it for the right reasons. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. That meeting would be the start of something bigger, something that would force every hidden truth in our family into the light. But before that storm, came one last moment of stillness, and in that stillness, I made my choice. The day I sat Mark down to talk, my hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid of what I'd done, but because I knew this would change us. He had just come home from work, tired, distracted. I watched him kick off his shoes, pour a glass of water like it was just another evening. And for a moment, I almost stayed silent, almost convinced myself it wasn't the right time. But then I remembered. There's never a perfect time to tell your husband that you've removed him from his own mother's will. So I took a deep breath and said his name. Mark, we need to talk, and I need you to listen without defending anyone. Just listen. He froze. I think he sensed it wasn't a normal conversation. I told him everything, what his mother had said. Just entre la day. How she made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. Midasol. How I had spent years tiptoeing, giving, hoping. And how I had finally chosen to let go of the fantasy that one day I would be enough for her. Then I handed him a copy of the revised will. I took you off as co-executor, I said, and I'm no longer handling her estate. Let her choose someone she considers real family. He looked stunned, not angry, just stunned. For a moment he didn't say anything. Then finally, his voice barely above a whisper, he said, I didn't know it hurt you this much, and that broke me. Because that's the problem, isn't it? So many of us hide our pain so well that even the people we love the most don't see it until it's too late. He didn't fight me. He didn't beg me to undo it. He just sat there, holding the paper, realizing, maybe for the first time, what I had been carrying all along. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. I wish I could tell you that after that conversation, everything changed, that Mark stood up for me, that his mother apologized, that we all sat down and healed like a perfect ending to a sad story. But that's not what happened. A week passed before she called. Mark must have told her. I could hear the rage in her voice before I even picked up the phone. How dare you go behind my back like that? You ungrateful woman. I took you in like a daughter. You've always been so cold. I never trusted you completely, and now I know why. And I just sat there, listening. I didn't defend myself. I didn't argue, because I finally understood something. There is no apology that can fix a relationship someone never believed in to begin with. I had been waiting for her to change, waiting for her to see my worth, but she never would. Not because I wasn't enough, but because she didn't want to see me. That phone call ended with her saying, "You've caused a permanent rift in this family." And she was right. But it wasn't me who caused it. It was years of quiet disrespect, of loving on conditions, of pretending to accept someone while secretly dismissing them at every turn. After the call, Mark asked me if I regretted it. I looked at him and said honestly, "No, I regret not doing it sooner." Because sometimes healing doesn't come from fixing things. It comes from letting go of the hope that someone will ever love you the way you deserve. After that phone call, things were tense. Mark tried to pretend like life could go back to normal. He was quieter, more careful with his words, like he was walking on a tightrope between me and his mother. He never blamed me out loud, but I could see the conflict in his eyes, like he was grieving the image of peace he thought we had. Meanwhile, his mother started her campaign. She called his sisters, his cousins, anyone who would listen. She told them I was controlling, manipulative, that I was trying to isolate her son from his real family. And just like that, the phone calls stopped. The birthday invites. The texts. It was like I had been erased. Mark's sister, who once hugged me like her own, unfriended me online. A cousin we used to host for dinner every few months suddenly couldn't make it anymore. I was being cut off. Not with words, but with silence. And that silence? It hurt more than anything they could have said. But strangely, it also brought a kind of clarity, because for the first time, I saw who was really there for us, and who had only ever tolerated me to keep the family peace. I stopped chasing approval, stopped trying to explain myself to people who had already chosen sides. And Mark, well, he started to notice too. He saw how easily they turned cold, how fast they believed the worst about me without asking for my side. One night, after another dinner in silence, he reached across the table and said, "You don't have to prove yourself to them anymore. I see you. I get it now." And even though things were falling apart around us, for the first time in a long time, something between us began to feel real again. After all the silence, the judgment, and the subtle exile from his family, Mark began to change, not in some dramatic, overnight transformation, but in the small, quiet ways that mean the most when you felt alone for too long. He started asking questions he'd never asked before, like, "How long have you felt like this? Why didn't I see it sooner? What did I miss?" And those questions, they meant everything. Because for once, it wasn't about defending his mother. It was about understanding me. We started doing things we hadn't done in years, cooking dinner together without the TV on, taking walks at sunset, sitting in silence. But this time, the kind that felt comforting, not heavy. He began to put up boundaries. Real ones. When his mother called to demand we show up to a family birthday, he told her no. Not maybe or we'll see. Just no. She didn't take it well. "She's changed you," she snapped. "This isn't the son I raised." But maybe that was the point. He wasn't her little boy anymore. He was a man learning how to love his wife without apology. I won't pretend it was easy. There were days he still looked torn, still hurt that the people he loved were being so cruel and petty. But he stopped asking me to shrink myself to make them comfortable. He started standing with me instead of between us. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. I wasn't trying to belong to a family who never wanted me. I was building a new one. One where I was finally seen, finally heard, and finally chosen. The storm had passed, at least on the outside. His mother had gone quiet. His family had distanced themselves. And honestly, that silence began to feel like freedom. I finally had space to breathe, to think, to reflect not just on the hurt they caused, but on the strength I had to finally stop accepting it. One afternoon, I sat down with a copy of our legal documents. Quadim Hill. It was time to update the will. Time to write down, in ink, the kind of life I wanted to leave behind, not one built on pretending. Mark had always been the sole beneficiary, but this time, I added a letter. Not a legal document, just a note. For me, to the woman I used to be, you tried so hard to belong. You bent, you broke, you apologized for taking up space. But now? Now you choose peace. Sifetis peace. Bayed. You don't have to earn love. Bayatang. You don't have to stay where you're not wanted. Bayatang. You are enough. When Mark read it, he cried. He said, "This feels more honest than anything we've written in years." And it was because we weren't just cutting people out. We were clearing space. Space for joy, for real connection. For a future not held hostage by people who only love when they're in control. Mark began therapy, not because I asked, but because he wanted to. He told me, "If I'm going to be the kind of man who protects your heart, I need to understand why I didn't before." That moment? That was everything. I used to think the cost of standing up for myself would be losing my marriage. But instead, it saved it. It's been months since I made that decision. To redraw the lines, to protect what was ours, Mark and I have grown in ways I never imagined possible. The pain of rejection was deep, but it forced us to dig deeper into each other. We started celebrating the family we built, not the one we were born into. Friends who stood by us, chosen family who never judged. The laughter we shared in quiet Sunday afternoons. The small rituals that made a house feel like home. I learned something crucial through all of this. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when it counts. I won't lie, there are still hard days, when the past tries to sneak back in, when the hurt tries to whisper doubts. But then I remember how far we've come. How we chose love over pain. How we chose truth over silence. And I know, for the first time, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. I hope sharing this story helps someone out there who's hurting, who's feeling invisible, or trapped by family drama. Ame, you don't have to stay where you're not wanted. You can choose peace. You can find your own family. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are not alone.